Welcome back to our channel. The 1-cent penny, a tiny coin with a rich history and lasting impact on America. The year 1980, a time of big changes, a blend of triumphs, challenges, and shifts in the cultural and political landscape of America. Ronald Reagan was on the brink of becoming President of the United States, and the country was dealing with economic challenges like inflation and energy crises. But within the busy backdrop of these events, something seemingly ordinary, yet incredibly valuable in its own way, was quietly circulating in the hands of Americans, the 1981-cent penny. Now, you might be thinking, a penny? What could possibly make a penny from 1980 so special? It's just a small, copper coin, right? Well, hold on to that thought because the story of the 1980 penny is far more intriguing than you might imagine, and by the end of this video, you'll see how this small piece of currency is tied to much more than just a fraction of a dollar. You'll also discover how some of these pennies, depending on their condition and rarity, are worth a lot more than you think, up to an astonishing $148,000. Let's take a step back and dive into the history of the penny, especially the 1980 version. The penny has been in circulation in the United States for over a century, and over the years, it's undergone various changes in design and composition. By 1980, the penny had already been around for a long time, but this particular year marks an interesting period in the history of American coinage. At the time, the 1-cent coin had a design that was nearly 70 years old. The image of Abraham Lincoln had been gracing the obverse, or front side, of the penny since 1909, making it one of the longest-running portraits on any American coin. The Lincoln design was created by artist Victor David Brenner, and it had become an iconic symbol of the penny. His depiction of Lincoln's face, facing to the right, was surrounded by the word liberty to the left and the phrase, "In God We Trust," to the right. Beneath the portrait, you'd find the year of minting, in this case, 1980, marking the specific year that particular penny was produced. Now, the reverse of the 1980 penny was equally familiar to those who had handled these coins. It featured the image of the Lincoln Memorial, a design that had been in place since 1959. The reverse design was created by Frank Gasparo and depicted the memorial in Washington, D.C. It was an image that not only represented the nation's deep respect for Abraham Lincoln, but it also symbolized the strength and resilience of America itself. This design remained unchanged in 1980, continuing to evoke the powerful presence of the memorial, with "United States of America" inscribed along the top and "E Pluribus Unum" along the bottom. In the center, the words 1 cent stood proudly, clearly indicating the coin's value, but there's more to this story than just the design. The composition of the 1980 penny is equally noteworthy. At that time, the U.S. Mint was using a copper-based alloy, with the coin made from 95% copper and 5% zinc. The penny weighed 3.11 grams and measured 19.05 millimeters in diameter. These specifications were standard for the penny up until 1982, when the Mint made a controversial change to the coin's composition to reduce production costs. However, in 1980, pennies were still made from the classic copper alloy, which would contribute to their later appeal with collectors. The minting of the 1980 penny involved a high-precision process. The U.S. Mint would strike billions of pennies each year, with high-pressure machines embossing the design onto metal planchets. These blanks would be fed into the machinery, where they'd be struck by dies that imprinted the iconic portrait of Lincoln and the Lincoln Memorial. The end result: millions of pennies in circulation across the country, helping to fund the everyday transactions of American life. However, not all of the 1980 pennies were made perfectly. Minting errors, such as double strikes, off-center strikes, and die cracks, would occur from time to time, turning ordinary pennies into rare collectibles. For a coin to be valuable, though, it needed to meet a specific set of criteria: rarity, condition, and sometimes, errors that made it even more special. Collectors of coins, especially those interested in rare and error-filled pieces, started noticing that some 1980 pennies exhibited imperfections. These imperfections weren't necessarily mistakes but rather unusual variations in the minting process. Errors such as a double die, where part of the design was struck more than once, became particularly desirable among numismatists. These errors were subtle and often difficult to spot, but for a trained eye, they represented a hidden treasure. Over the years, these 1980 pennies became highly sought after by collectors who understood their rarity. Many collectors specifically sought out pennies in excellent condition, as coins with little to no wear were valuable in the numismatic market. Coins with full luster, no visible scratches or blemishes, and that were well centered in their strike, were considered prime specimens. The higher the quality, the more these pennies could fetch, and then, there's the elusive penny with the right combination of rarity, error, and condition, a coin that could turn a regular penny from 1980 into a highly valuable piece of history. These pennies, especially those that were error-struck or had pristine features, have reached impressive prices at auctions. For some of the rarest specimens, the value soared into the thousands of dollars, and for a very few exceptional examples, they have become worth tens of thousands, even up to $148,000. Yes, you heard that right, $148,000. That's the value that one extremely rare and exceptional 1980 penny has fetched in a recent auction. The penny that earned this staggering sum was a perfect storm of rarity, condition, and an error that collectors had been searching for. Whether it was an off-center strike, a double die, or some other imperfection that made it stand out, this penny became a dream find for collectors, a coin so special that it could be worth more than most people's homes. So, what does this tell us about the 1980 penny? It's a reminder that even the most unassuming coins can hold incredible value if you know what to look for. While the majority of 1980 pennies in circulation are worth only 1 cent, there are rare versions that have become valuable collector's items. Whether it's because of an error in minting, its exceptional condition, or its place in the history of American coinage, the 1980 penny continues to be a fascinating subject for collectors. The next time you're going through your change, keep an eye out for those pennies from 1980. Sure, the odds are slim that you'll find one that's worth $148,000, but even a coin with a slight imperfection or one in remarkable condition could be worth a little more than the pennies you're used to. As we've seen, sometimes it's the smallest things, like a penny, that can hold the greatest surprises. So, to wrap things up, the 1980 USA 1-cent penny may appear simple and unremarkable at first glance, but it carries with it a world of value waiting to be discovered. For collectors and coin enthusiasts, it's a reminder of how important it is to understand the history and the details of the coins you come across. And for the lucky few, the 1980 penny could very well become the gem of your collection, with a value that could reach an incredible $148,000. Thank you for taking the time to explore the fascinating world of the 1980 penny with me today. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about rare coins and the stories behind them, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more exciting content. And remember, that next penny you find just might be worth more than you think. The year is 1983. It's a time of political shifts, technological advancement, and a whole new world of pop culture emerging in the United States. Ronald Reagan is re-elected as president, the personal computer is beginning to change the way people live and work, and the world is rapidly evolving in every aspect imaginable. Amid all this change, one thing that hasn't changed is the humble penny. The 1-cent coin remains a staple of American currency, circulating quietly in pockets, purses, and piggy banks across the nation. But while most of us are used to seeing pennies and thinking little of them, there's one penny from 1983 that's anything but ordinary. That's right, this seemingly insignificant coin, the 1983 1-cent penny, has become a coveted treasure for coin collectors. In fact, depending on its condition and any possible minting errors, this penny can be worth a whopping $138,000. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why the 1983 penny is so remarkable and how it went from being a simple piece of change to becoming one of the most sought-after coins in the world. Let's go back to 1983 and take a look at what was happening with American coinage at the time. By this point, the design of the penny had been around for decades. Abraham Lincoln had graced the obverse of the coin since 1909, when his portrait first appeared on the penny to mark the centennial of his birth. The image, created by artist Victor David Brenner, was instantly recognizable. His profile, captured in sharp detail, became an enduring symbol of the penny, and for nearly 75 years, this design remained unchanged. However, in 1982, a significant change was made to the penny's composition. The rising costs of copper forced the U.S. Mint to start making pennies with a new alloy. Prior to 1982, the penny had been composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc. But in 1982, the Mint switched to a predominantly zinc penny, with just a thin copper plating on the outside. This change was made to help reduce the cost of production, as the price of copper had skyrocketed. The new pennies produced from 1982 onward were 97.5% zinc and only 2.5% copper, and they weighed less than the previous copper pennies. The 1983 penny, then, was one of the first pennies to be struck in this new, zinc-based alloy. This shift in composition created the first key factor that would later make the 1983 penny valuable. You see, not all coins from this era were made with the same consistency. Some of the 1983 pennies were struck with an unusual mixture of copper and zinc, leading to slight variations in their color, weight, and overall appearance. These variations sparked the interest of collectors who began to take notice of these pennies. Another important thing to note is that the 1983 penny still featured the classic design of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. The memorial had been on the reverse of the penny since 1959, so by 1983, it had been in use for nearly a quarter century. The memorial design, created by Frank Gasparo, depicted a front view of the iconic structure, with United States of America inscribed at the top, E pluribus unum at the bottom, and 1 cent boldly displayed in the center. However, what made the 1983 penny stand out to coin collectors were not the designs themselves, but rather some of the quirks in its minting process. As with most coins, small errors happen during production. These mistakes, often subtle, can turn an ordinary penny into a rare, valuable find. For the 1983 penny, one of the most notable errors was the presence of off-center strikes, where the coin's design was misaligned when struck by the minting press. This resulted in pennies with unusual features, some with portions of the design missing, others with overlapping designs. Additionally, there were coins produced that exhibited a distinctive double die error, which occurs when the die used to strike the coin shifts slightly during the process. This results in parts of the design being imprinted more than once, causing the image to appear doubled. These types of errors can make a coin much more valuable because they are rare and offer something unique for collectors. The 1983 penny's composition and the possible minting errors that came with it gave rise to a fascination among numismatists, the experts who study coins and currency. It wasn't just the 1983 penny's design that made it interesting, but the subtle, unique variations that could turn it into a treasure. As time went on, these quirky 1983 pennies continued to capture the attention of collectors. While the vast majority of pennies in circulation were worth just 1 cent, a small number of these coins, with the right minting errors or exceptional condition, could fetch a surprising amount of money. Some 1983 pennies with notable mistakes, such as off-center strikes or double dies, began to attract higher bids at auctions, and people who had once overlooked the penny as just loose change started to recognize its potential value. This brings us to the thrilling part of the story, the value of a 1983 penny today. While most of these pennies are still worth just 1 cent, the rare versions, especially those with minting errors, have been sold for thousands of dollars. But here's the real kicker: a truly exceptional 1983 penny, one with the perfect combination of rarity, error, and condition, has been known to fetch a jaw-dropping price of $138,000. Yes, you heard that correctly. One single penny could be worth $138,000, depending on its unique characteristics and how well preserved it is. This value might seem incredible for a simple coin that once slipped through your fingers unnoticed, but it's not entirely surprising when you consider the history, rarity, and the allure of a coin with a fascinating backstory. Collectors and investors alike are always on the lookout for these rare pennies, as they are considered hidden gems in the world of numismatics. They represent a moment in history, a time when a change in production methods led to a coin that was truly unique. So, the next time you come across a 1983 penny, take a moment to examine it closely. Check for any minting errors, such as double die or off-center strikes. Look for signs of unusual wear or imperfections that could set it apart from the millions of other pennies in circulation. You might just have a coin that's worth far more than its face value. As we wrap up today's story of the 1983 penny, I hope you've learned just how special this seemingly ordinary coin really is. From its historical significance as part of the U.S. Mint's transition to a new penny composition, to its collector appeal, to the potential for a staggering $138,000 value, the 1983 penny is a reminder that in the world of coins, even the most humble pieces of currency can hold incredible value. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of the 1983 penny. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about rare coins and the fascinating stories behind them, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an exciting episode. And remember, the next time you're going through your change, that 1 cent could be worth a whole lot more. In the year 1985, the world was witnessing dramatic shifts. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union was reaching its peak, the world's technology was beginning to advance at breakneck speeds, and the music world was still buzzing with the energy of the 80s. Reagan was in the White House, Back to the Future dominated movie theaters, and the world was moving into a more connected, globalized future. Yet, amidst all of these monumental changes, one tiny object continued to be a staple of everyday life in America, the penny. At first glance, the 1985 1-cent coin might seem like just another penny, an insignificant part of the nation's currency system. After all, the penny had been around since the 18th century and had undergone various changes in its design and composition over the years. But here's the thing, the 1985 penny, like many pennies from the 1980s, holds a fascinating history of its own. It's a coin that, despite its humble appearance, could be worth up to $130,000 today. Yes, you heard that right. So how does a seemingly ordinary penny from 1985 end up fetching such a high price? Let's take a deep dive into the history and design of the 1985 penny and discover the story behind its collector appeal. First, let's step back and take a look at the broader context of the time. By 1985, the penny was undergoing a significant change in its composition. Prior to 1982, pennies were made from a copper alloy, with 95% copper and 5% zinc. But as the price of copper increased, the U.S. Mint made a pivotal decision. They switched the composition of the penny to a primarily zinc-based alloy. This change, which was made official in 1982, reduced the copper content to just 2.5%, with the rest of the coin being made up of zinc. In essence, the penny became lighter and less expensive to produce. In 1985, this new, zinc-based penny composition was in full effect. The 1985 penny, like its predecessors from 1982 onward, weighed 2.5 grams and had a diameter of 19.05 millimeters. It was no longer the familiar copper-colored penny most people had known, it had a more muted, duller look. However, this change wasn't just cosmetic, it was also a crucial moment in the history of the U.S. Mint. With this new composition, the pennies were now coated with a thin layer of pure copper, making them appear very similar to the older, copper alloy pennies at first glance. However, the change in composition also created a subtle but important difference in the way these coins were struck. For collectors, these differences would play a key role in determining the value of the penny, as some rare variations of the 1985 penny would emerge. Now, let's talk about the design of the 1985 penny. By this time, the design had remained relatively unchanged for several decades. Since 1909, the obverse of the penny had been graced by the image of President Abraham Lincoln. His face, created by artist Victor David Brenner, had become a national symbol. On the 1985 penny, Lincoln's portrait still appeared on the front, along with the inscriptions, Liberty and, In God We Trust, as well as the year of minting, 1985, beneath the image. On the reverse side of the 1985 penny, there was another iconic image, the Lincoln Memorial. This design, which had been in place since 1959, featured a view of the memorial with the words, United States of America, inscribed along the top and E pluribus unum, along the bottom. In the center, 1 cent was displayed boldly. The reverse design was a fitting tribute to Lincoln's legacy, and it would continue to be featured on the penny until 2009, when the U.S. Mint introduced the Lincoln Bicentennial designs. Now, here's where things get interesting. While the 1985 penny was generally minted in massive quantities, just like most years, the 1985 version still had some characteristics that made it stand out in the world of coin collecting. And this is where the real value comes in. Collectors of rare coins know that there's always a chance that a minting error or unique variation can turn an ordinary coin into something incredibly valuable. The 1985 penny, like many other coins, saw its share of these rare occurrences. One of the most notable errors that would eventually turn heads in the numismatic community was the presence of double dies and off-center strikes. A double die error occurs when the die used to strike the coin shifts slightly, causing the design to be imprinted more than once. This results in the appearance of a doubled image, which is particularly noticeable in the lettering and numbers on the coin. For example, a penny with a double die error might show the word Liberty or the year 1985 in a slightly doubled form, making it a much more interesting and rare find. Another error that collectors sought after in the 1985 penny was the off-center strike. An off-center strike occurs when the blank planchet, the metal disc that becomes a coin, isn't properly aligned with the die during the minting process. As a result, the design may be partially or fully off-center, leaving a coin with an unusual and striking appearance. These coins were typically discarded in the minting process, but for collectors, these errors can be incredibly valuable. In addition to these minting errors, the condition of the 1985 penny plays a crucial role in its value. Like any collectible, coins in pristine condition are far more valuable than those that are worn or damaged. A 1985 penny with a sharp, crisp design and minimal wear is considered much more valuable than one that's been through years of circulation. In fact, some coins that have been well preserved, with no signs of corrosion or scratches, have sold for premium prices. Now, let's bring it all together. The 1985 penny may have been minted in large quantities, but those rare versions with minting errors, unique characteristics, or exceptional condition are the ones that collectors are truly after. These coins represent a rare moment in the history of US currency, a moment when a tiny piece of change could turn into something far more valuable than its face value. And here's the exciting part: some of these 1985 pennies have sold for jaw-dropping amounts at auctions. While most of the 1985 pennies are still worth only 1 cent, those with errors or in pristine condition have fetched impressive sums. Some particularly rare examples have sold for as much as $130,000. Yes, a penny from 1985 could be worth $130,000, thanks to its rarity, its unique minting features, and the growing interest in numismatics. Whether it's an off-center strike, a double die error, or simply a penny that's been exceptionally well preserved, the 1985 penny is a prime example of how something as small and seemingly insignificant as a penny can hold incredible value. So, the next time you find a 1985 penny, don't just toss it aside. Take a closer look. Check for any signs of errors or unique characteristics that could make it a rare and valuable find. You just might have a hidden gem in your pocket worth far more than 1 cent. As we wrap up today's story about the 1985 penny, I hope you've learned how this simple coin, through its design, composition, and minting errors, became a coveted collectible that can be worth as much as $130,000. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of rare coins and want to learn more, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another exciting video. And remember, the next time you're going through your change, that penny might just be worth far more than you think.